Dun, 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 dun. Dun, dun, dun. Okay, yeah, let's get started. So let me show you guys this thing. All right, so here's just kind of this calculation that I've done um, in the past to kind of predict how the numbers do. So the game is unit cost, let's say $20. So this is our first investor, okay? Now some of these, this stuff doesn't, ignore this stuff up here. So we got a store cut. Let's go with 30%. That's just how much the stores take. And taxes is like, let's just go 40, which is kind of aggressive, but that's we're not even get to there. So let's say our first investor is Rory Bell. Okay, so Rory Bell gives me, let's say you give me 50,000. Actually, you know, we're not even gonna bring in the second investor in the picture. So Rory Bell gives me 50,000, and because what happens is when the game goes on sale, I pay Rory Bell back 50. All the initial revenue comes in and it goes to pay back Rory Bell. So the first 50,000 I get goes straight to Rory Bell, and then we do a 75-25% split, and that money goes to. Then we split, right? So after the first 50,000, Mr. Bell, right? So Mr. Bell gives me 50,000. I work on the game. The initial revenue goes to pay him back, and then I take, and then after that, it's a 75-25 split. So every dollar I give Rory Bell 25 cents. So this is what's going on here, right? So I say I sell 10,000 units. Now that's 200,000. The store takes 30%. We're left with 140,000. Revenue after I pay back Rory Bell, I get 90,000. Then we pay the post-principal repayment, right? The interest, in which case, so 25% of what's remaining of the 90,000, that I pay 25% of 90,000 to Rory Bell. I'm left with 67,500. This is without any other investors. Okay. Now this is like if we're doing revenue share. So let's also just make this easy. Let's take out expenses for all that. After investor rev share. Okay, so like we talked about this. So this is, if I sell 10,000, the after tax revenue I get is 40,000. I don't know if you guys can see this. So this, ignore the net profit because that doesn't make any sense. I get 40,500. Yeah, you know what? I'm gonna, these two columns don't make any sense, so ignore those. But I get 40,500. We divide it by, this is actually should be divided by 5 now. So that leaves me with an annual salary of $8,100, which obviously sucks. So if I make 10,000, that's not great, right? And let's just say, let's say after the first investor, I get another one, and they give me 50,000. So we're getting a little. Now, obviously, this is going to cost more than 50,000. And let's say we also pay them back. Let's assume they're a little bit generous. They're like, you know what, you don't have to pay me back double. They just pay me back 1.5. Okay, so we do 1.5. Right, then it's even less, right? So, and what about my own personal expenses? Like, this is the cost that I forfeited in order to make the game, right? The opportunity cost. So this is like expense opportunity cost. You know, let's start getting a little bit more accurate. Let's say for each 50 years, each of the 5 years, it's 40,000. Which in the U.S. now, to keep all of this in mind, a beginner programmer in the US in a game studio in sort of like a town with okay cost of living is about 72,000 plus benefits, right? So you get 72,000, and then you don't have to spend money on health insurance, which can be like 2,000, 3,000 a year. Okay, so these are just the numbers. So this means you can see the column that we want to be. This is, I'm not doing revenue share, right? So if I start bringing on a sound design musician, they want revenue share. Okay. But you can see I do not make, after a second investor principal repayment. So really we're looking at this is after I sell so you know what, let's just take this out and just for a little easier. So this means after, if I sell 25,000 copies, you know, I get 175,000, which might seem like a lot, except taxes take a big chunk of that. And I'm left with 21,000 per year, right? So you can see it's really not, it's like, so where I consider my break even is 40,000 units. And again, that might seem like a lot, because the after tax amount, that's 385,000. Well, no, that's sort of after everyone's paid back. I'm taxed 231, and I'm left with an annual salary of, we can probably move this over since we don't need units sold. But you can see I'm left with $46,200. So yeah, that is not bad, except that is lower than what you would have made working at a game studio. Yeah, you'd be hard pressed to find programming jobs that pay this little, especially today, right? And this is every year. Whereas if you were to work at a studio, you probably would get like 70, maybe for the first 2 years, then like 75, and then 80, right? And all that time you can invest a big chunk of that. So yeah, and that's 40,000 units, right? If we look at what are all the games doing these days. So, because I know a lot of people are like, oh, well, they look at Steam Spy, they look at the numbers. You know, like this Bomber Crew game is doing quite well. And to be fair, it just came out. But, you know, that's sitting at 25,000, right? Like, and this is on the top seller for the indie game list. If we look at a game like Hop, which I think has done quite well, I would consider this game a success. So that's sitting about 38,000. It's $20, but this is from Runic Games, which I think has a following already. So, yeah, and again, you know, this has been out for a little less than a month, but this is a game that I would consider is doing very well. But it just goes to show the numbers are very much stacked against me, and I think it's important to be realistic. So yeah, you know, for me, a best case, a good case is like hitting that 40,000, hopefully ideally within the first 3 months. And to me, that's what I would consider that to be a success. I mean, because yeah, I mean, obviously, if it sells like 100,000, that leaves me with a lot, but I don't, you know, it's not, you can't really think about things. Oh yeah, first of all, this is based on this much, right? Like, you know, I think cost is much higher than this, and then you know, but that came out in 2012. I mean, that's the Antichamber sold 1 million, and it's like when you think about Antichamber, Portal, those are huge successes, which I just don't think it's like, to me, all of those are outliers. You can't use those, right? And of course, we're not including my opportunity costs or like other personal expenses, right? So this is like, that's how, like, let's say, how much have I spent on my own? We'll just put a very conservative estimate, 100,000. that leaves me with, you know, and these are costs that like the studio would be paying for if you weren't doing that. So Hat in Time did very well, 60,000, but you know, we can look at like their numbers, you know, but theirs is so 30. So still, it's like even with 60 with one person, you know, that's 67. But I think it probably, you know, that game probably cost them like 200,000 to make. So I don't know. I mean, they also got Kickstarter, which is basically, you know, kind of like free money. But there are plenty of games which have underperformed. I'm just bringing this up as another indie funded game. Future Unfolding. It's sitting at 2,000 units. I mean, it's barely bigger than the standard deviation, right? 2,000 units max. So when we yeah, so I just want to give you guys a reality of like how, and I think most indie games on average on Steam on average 5,000 units lifetime. So right, and you see people working at Ubisoft. Like look at the Forbes 30 under 30 list. How many of them work at companies, right? You get that. Like if you get on Forbes 30 under 30, again, I'm not saying that that's important. I'm not saying that's what you live for, but that is stuff that potential employers are like, hey, that's important, and right? You got that gap on the resume. You're missing out on, like, we can talk about all this stuff about, you know, doing it on your own and working at a company, and there are all these benefits, right? Like this whole time you've had health insurance, like you don't have the same level of stress. You're socializing, you're meeting all these people. So I just want to give a clear idea of like what is something that, what's like, you know, realistic numbers that you can expect, right? So, right, and I'm being super conservative here where, oh, this is, right. And just like the reality of it, right? So for me, 40,000. So, you know, at this point, I've kind of made my peace with it and I'm trying to be super conservative. So 40,000, that really doesn't leave me with much. Right. It's like, yeah, I get annual salary of 22,000, which is not a lot. So let's just, since we're here, you know, Chris said like, what would you do if your game did 100,000 units, right? And just so again, this might seem like a lot. Maybe like after I pay back all the investors, you're like, well, I have 1 million. That seems pretty good, you know? But you know, tax is going to take a big chunk of that. Probably take like half of it, which divided by 523,000. Yeah, that's good. But you know, this is again, this is a maybe, right? This is not guaranteed. So, and you know, if you start doing revenue share, so let's say like a sound designer is, I don't know, like, you know, 10%, musician 10%. So like let's just say you give away 20% revenue share because you don't have enough. Think about it. This cost so far. This cost is only 150,000 for the development of the game. Well, 250,000, which again is very, very low for indie games. I mean, that's 5 people if you were paying them salary for 1 year, right? So if you had like, let's say you take like a programmer and an artist and they work on the game for 2 years, that's 250,000, like full time. That's gone, right? So let's say you do sound design and musician. You're like, okay, you know, let's do revenue share. You each get 10%. And you start paying them, and after that, even if you sell 100,000 copies, you're really only getting 96,000 per year. So again, I mean, it's not like these numbers might. I just want to show you guys how it might seem like these numbers are really high, but it can be difficult to make money. And what I've got going for me is a few things. The game has, on the whole, been fairly cheap to make. So like I said, if I hit 40,000, the numbers are, because I'm not doing revenue share with anyone at the moment, which has been good. So if I hit 40,000, that leaves me with okay, it's like 20, 40, it's around that range, right? I mean these numbers are not exact because I don't I would be okay sharing this stuff, but I don't know if the investors are. But I can tell you it's like somewhere around, right, the 40, 50,000, I'd be able to walk away with like 40,000 per year for the last 5 years, which for me, I'm like, you know what, that's it's like, I'd be happy with that. So I'm being super conservative with my own estimates of what is success. So Chris said, what would you do if you sold 100,000? 100,000, that's not enough though to make another game, right? Like, okay, that's not, like, you back pay yourself, but you can't just take that money and go in, right? So you're not, like, really, it's not unless you sell, like, let's say I sell 150,000, which is a huge success. Hey, that leaves me with, okay, like 200K a year for the last 5 years. That's a lot. So you could theoretically take away, just be like, okay, I just paid myself 100 and then put 500,000 back into the studio. And then that gives you what? 500,000, probably 3 people. So 50, 150. So that gives you runway for 2.5 years. You see what I mean? So like, okay, you're like, okay, now I'd be financially stable, and that gives me a runway of 2.5 years. So like if you did 150,000 units, that wouldn't be a bad, okay, you can do that, but you might also just lose all of that. I don't know, it's like, so it has to be a fairly big success if you wanted to continue making games. So it gives you a year, but you're just, the thing is what you have to account for is the games fail, right? So you're like, if you are trying to run a business, you can't do it like this, right? So what you have to do is you have to like make faster games, a lot of them, and kind of go in with the expectation that like 9 of them fail and only 1 succeeds, but that 1 is successful enough to pay for the others. And that changes the way you would approach by the way, I think everyone knows, like, I'm backed by Indie Fund. That's public information. So this is how the Indie Fund, so this is not the amount I've taken, but the way Indie Fund works and a lot of other funding. Now, this is slightly different because what Indie Fund is doing is they give you a principal, and in this case we put 100, and I pay them back double, and then it's over, right? Now with publishers, that's not what they do. Publishers, they take another 30%, right? So that means you would bring up the revenue share, and they probably want to do, like, this is like a very typical, it's like 150,000. So you're not, their revenue share, like, you don't even see money until, like, right? Like, so if you go with the publisher, and that's indefinite, and I keep doing the rev share amount just because that's indefinite. So like, let's say you do that, and then on top of that, you revenue share with artists on top, so it's like 0.3, and then you do whatever is remaining, so like 0. Which is like 0.7 divided by that, whatever, right? We're just kind of doing the math. So maybe at the end of the day, between revenue share and other people, you're really giving a total of 0.4. Your annual salary at 40,000 is like 40,000 is 12, which is also, so I only get 12,000 a year. And that's tricky because that means the publisher has recouped, right? They've recouped early on. And those first 10,000 units are the easy ones, right? So here's what happens, right? The publisher fronts you money. In the first 10,000 units, your publisher has broken even. You still haven't made any money. So yeah, so I just want to give you guys like the reality, you know, it's not, yeah, I want to be, yeah, so I've got like a few things going for me. One, on the whole, I don't have a publisher. The indie fund terms are pretty good for what they are. I'm not doing any revenue share at the moment, and it's just one person that I have to support. So yeah, I can see myself like, Chris, the only way I would, the thing is, if I make 40,000 units, sell 40,000 units, I will probably walk away for sure. It's just, you know, it's like, you know, I'm 30 now. When I started it was 25, and I'm just at this age where like I've got other things that are important. Like, you know, I want to be able to travel to see my family and like go on vacation, and I want to maybe have my own family. And I got to start thinking like retirement and college funds for kids, and you know, if you have family, your health insurance, right? So there's all that other stuff, and I gotta start, especially if I only made 40,000 a year. I probably need to start looking for work that pays me a little bit more. Like, you know, if I hit 40,000, it's like, like I would be happy. You know, the whole thing wasn't a disaster, but I also need to like start future planning, and I just feel like indie games as a whole is kind of risky. But yeah, if I, you know, 100,000 is like, then I would be in like a good spot. Financially, it worked out well for me, but I'm not really in a position to like risk more. Like if it was like 100,000 units sold, I would have been like, I'm in like a good spot and I can afford to lose some while planning for the future, but not enough to like fund my own game, right? It's really not until like 140,000, 150,000 units where you start to be able to like, you're financially okay, you can plan for the future, and you can invest more in another game. So like, that's really where it starts to become a reality. So I don't know what the corporate tax is, but I know like for personal taxes, it's incremented, right? So it's like your first 50,000 is taxed at like, I don't know, 10%. Then like the next 20,000 is taxed at 20%. So it's a scaled rate. But we did 40 because it was just easier, better to underestimate. So yeah, like you see, C# coder in Chicago makes 90,000 a year. And when you think about like your investment, right, like 90,000 a year, let's say you keep your same expense, right? And you save some of it and you spend some of it. And let's say you invest 30% of that. You invest 30,000 of the 90,000 you make. You start that when you're 25. That's like just the principal you've put in is 150,000 over the course of that 5 years. And then with that compound interest, like that's a lot, you know. And you start retirement like which none of this has. So is yeah, and you pay personal taxes fully for that year. I mean, you can do some stuff like you can back pay, like you can count expenses for the previous 2 years. Like if you have losses, you can count before, but I think that only goes back for 2 years, right? So, I mean, I do have a company, but it's not a corporation. It's a limited liability, right? So and you can like put some stuff in to the company instead of paying yourself, but that's still, that's like a little bit more complicated, but the general sentiment is the same. Like I'm not gonna magically end up with another $1 million or anything. So yeah. Anyway, I just wanted to give you guys and like 150. I'm not even letting myself think about that much, right? That's a big hit, and I think to be realistic, let's go 40,000. And also, another thing is if you are looking at these games, if you look at their numbers, I'm going to use this just because it's no Project High Rise. Like, this number might seem high. You might think they've done very well, but they were in Humble Bundle Monthly. And I say this, and I'm not going to discuss the actual numbers, but like, a big chunk of that is from Humble Monthly, which they give you a fixed rate for. It's not, you can't just, you don't just go to Steam Spy and take the price and multiply by owners, because that's often much higher than that. So, yeah, I hope this has been informative. Probably really depressing, but I think it's important to think about, and certainly for me, I'm like, I gotta make my peace, right? So, but fortunately, my expenses are not that high, and we're not, the revenue share is not that aggressive. But even with this, and if we're to keep that, like, is still, yeah, right. I'm still not walking away with very much. 15,000, 16, 20,000 per year. No, I could. I am incorporated, but that's a little bit different. The way the tax works is more like the company makes money and then you pay yourself a salary and you only get taxed on the salary, but it's not like it makes, if you have if you're making like $1 billion, like, yeah, it's gonna make a difference because like 1% is $1 million or something, right? But it's like, even if I make $1 million, that's not yeah, it'll save me, maybe 5 to like 10,000, which yeah, obviously is significant, but it's not. What I'm saying is it doesn't change the position you're in, right? You're still like, it's not like, oh, you're not magically pulling out. It's more like you do 30% here and then like you don't get taxed like twice or something, but the core is the same. Yeah. So, right. It is like, there's that, and an accountant would be able to give you a much better, like, analysis of what but really the difference we're talking about is like, at any of these numbers that's realistic, we're talking like a 5,000 to 10,000 difference, which, yes, it is a lot and you want to save that, but it's not, that doesn't change the position, right? That's like standard deviation. So, so yeah, I want to, so, that's why it sucks, when you talk to people and they say they'll pirate the game, and you read about the, like, just like the Steam reviews, and then people are like, you only pay for this game when it's free, and that, like, I know a lot of people just sort of not familiar with this, but it's like, for me, I'm in a position where I'm thinking about all this, and then you read that and you're just like, fuck, like, you put so much of yourself and you're just barely, you're just barely breaking even. So that's, yeah, that can be tough. But yeah, anyway, thanks for watching. We've been streaming for 3.5 hours. God damn it, I was supposed to do a whole bunch of these buttons and I didn't get any done. Anyway, I gotta go now. I'll probably jump back on a little bit later tonight. But yeah, I wanted to, yeah, that's kind of one of the reasons why I want to share development, right? And just sort of be super transparent. So, earlier, I don't know if they're still here, Strumber or something, asked about like why, I was kind of like, I wouldn't go into game development. I'm not saying it's bad, and certainly working as a programmer in the scene is different, but where the reality of it is, especially as if you're kind of running your own thing, is not not really good, and it doesn't incentivize kind of this kind of game, right? It does. The thing is, here's the thing, it incentivizes, like, and I'm not saying that, like, there was that rock paper shotgun article, and this guy has sold like 500,000 games. I mean, they take him like 2 weeks to make, and he sells them for like 99 cents, most of the time on sale for 50% off. And the reason why he does it 50% off is because 50 cents is the lowest Valve will let you sell something for. So he sells most of his games at 50 cents, but they take him 2 weeks to make. But the thing is, I don't know if that I can do that stuff. And I feel like if you want to be running into this as a business, that's the kind of approach you need to be taking. All right, guys, I've been talking a lot. It's been 3.5 hours. Yeah, so, like I said, I think the game is in a good spot, but look, there's a huge chance I can just be broke by the end, which, like I said, is not, I'm not being like, I'm going to get 50, right? Like, you don't want to get complacent. Yeah, I don't want to become complacent, and I want to be mentally prepared. So anyway, I gotta sign off now. Let me see who else is streaming. I should make this one. I should put this. I should highlight this video. Yeah, and he also wasn't spending. I know it's Gray Alien, right? He also was not spending 5 years on one game, right? The whole thing he was talking about was like making these small games, like just changing the visuals and jumping in on that Christmas sale or jumping in on that Halloween sale. And like, that's the stuff you gotta do. And to me, I'm like, I like it like self-expression, but if I'm just making games for the sake of like making money, like, I don't know, I'd rather do something else. Like, again, not saying that that's a bad approach. In fact, I think it's a necessary approach, but for me, it's not why I made Manifold Garden. I just don't think the model in which I made Manifold Garden can be easily replicated. All right, I'm going to host Triple Jump Games, and I will talk to you guys later. I'll probably be back on later tonight. See ya.